Hello, this is Arthur Melman. I'm your host for this segment of GGG Insights, and we have with us again Michael McDonald, who was talking to us at first about where energy consumption and production was going, and we were talking about having, for example, a house in East Hampton where we had solar panels on the roof and we had some kind of a battery to store the energy so that when the sun went out, then we could still use solar power stored to operate our refrigerator, our appliances, and so forth. What we also started talking about at the very end of that first section was the word microgrid. And the simplest way to think about this is I've got a solar panel on the roof, I've got a battery in my basement someplace, but I'm still producing more energy than I need. And I take a wire and I run it over the fence to Michael's house. I've just created a grid. It's a very small grid, but that's the concept we're talking about, using my excess energy to power Michael's house. Or more realistically, Michael's going to power my house, I'm sure. But let's just talk about these microgrids and are there, how big can they get, where are they used, and so forth.
Okay. Well, let's maybe start with the simplest concept.
Sure.
Following Hurricane Maria, which hit Dominica and Puerto Rico, for example, it wiped out all the infrastructure in both of those islands. Everything gone. So Dominica, 99% of the grid was gone. It's over a year later, and still half the country still doesn't have any central grid. One of the 9 tasks that I worked with the Prime Minister on was to get the light into essentially the houses that were not going to have the grid for a very long period of time. So there's the Kalinago Indians.
This is Dominica versus Puerto Rico, which is a real mess.
Yeah, different. Okay. Well, both of them were big problems. Okay. But Puerto Rico has a lot more complexity because they have sort of a colonial government as well as the island government. So, but that's why I'm using Dominica as an example. Okay. So we brought solar lights, tens of thousands of them into Puerto Rico and also into Dominica through the Caribbean resilience system. And in the where the Carib Indians are, that the Caribbean Sea was named after, their real name is Kalinago, but the Spanish called them Caribs, which meant cannibals, unfortunately. But they were fierce. We brought solar lights into all of those households for all of the Kalinago territory and other places on the Atlantic coast and into all the shelters on the island, with the Prime Minister bringing those into the shelters.
We said bring them in. How long did it take? Did it take a matter of months or?
No, see, that was the interesting thing. We could bring them in immediately. So I brought thousands of them in immediately. I flew in on a helicopter before anybody really could get into the island. So we were able to bring it out to populations that still would not have any electricity if they didn't have this introduction of batteries, lithium-ion batteries, and solar panels with LED lights. So that's level 1. That's the simplest entry. And we should have lots of those in East Hampton in our pods, our distribution centers.
Mike, in Dominique, were various houses or shelters, whatever they were, tents, were they hooked together or everybody was a standalone generator and user storage?
Okay, so in level 1, they're all standalone lights with just a
solar panel, a battery, and LED.
That's correct. Okay. And they were built like an origami, so you could fold them out or you could collapse them and stick them in your pocket. So it was the only lights that were on during the hurricane and immediately after the hurricane, the whole entire island. Okay. We brought them in right before the hurricane.
Oh, did you? Okay.
For the Kalinago and the Rastafarians who didn't have access to these before. So, but at any rate, that's level 1. Level 2 is now bringing in larger batteries that can charge cell phones and fans and radios and other things. Okay, so now you've got a nanogrid essentially. You can build out within your own home a network for yourself. A nano being very small grid, or a pico even smaller. And then you go to microgrids. Okay, so now in the Colorado.
So micro isn't as small as it sounds. Micro is a lot bigger than a pico and a nano.
In the sense that we could have a microgrid for the springs, for example. And you can have aggregations of microgrids into what you would call a microgrid. But what we would begin to tie into what you could think of as a distributed, collectively intelligent grid, not just connected in terms of energy, but connected in terms of communication. But even more important, over the next decade or two, we're bringing in our autonomous vehicles into it, and other types of artificial intelligence.
Let's go back to today, because in our last segment we talked about people in East Hampton who now increasingly, like the supervisor, Peter von Skoyak, is putting solar panels on his roof. He's got addressable thermostats and so forth, and he's very energy conscious. And we talked about the fact that he can put a battery in his home, or anybody can put a battery in his home, store electrical power from the sun during the day and use it at night. Let's go to a step a little bit further, and let's talk about Town Hall. We have several buildings there. We have the Town Hall where the town is. We may have another building built in the near future. We have the courthouse. We have the police installation. We have a couple of trailers that have various departments. Let's talk about making that a self-sustainable unit. Probably not yet in 2018. It's a little bit late in the year. But if we said, okay, Mike, tell us how by the end of 2019 we can have a microgrid in that little community of the Town Hall campus. What do we do? How do we get there?
Okay, so that's what we're doing actually in Dominica now. In the Kalinago territory is all the hamlets there that we're working with, 8 hamlets that constitute this 3,700 acre territory. They all are being built out with microgrids, okay? And there is an administrative center there, sort of like we have here now in the town of East Hampton. And we're building out the resilience hub there, where the emergency operations center is there with police and fire and the mayor's EOC, for example. So we're powering that up as a compound, and then being able, within that contained area, sending the electricity from, let's say, a set of panels that sit on top of it could be on top of the courthouse or the police station. But can be sent then to the town hall as well.
So what we're talking about, again, I want to make it real for myself at least, the little town hall campus of East Hampton, we would have solar panels on virtually all the buildings. We might have some solar panels on the ground. We could take that big parking lot that we have out there, put solar panels on top of the parking lot, which is easier said than done, I know.
Well, the canopy is actually not a bad way to go.
Right.
And that's happening a lot.
And we can get some kind of big storage batteries. Somebody mentioned to me today that the town hall complex uses something in the neighborhood of 2.5 or 3 megawatts. Does that sound real world to you? A megawatt is like something else. I don't understand it, but
yeah, I can't say exactly, but it wouldn't surprise me.
It wouldn't be 100 megawatts, and it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
It would be something like that.
Yeah, I think if you're thinking 100 megawatts, you're probably thinking about the town of East Hampton.
Oh, okay. So
versus a complex where you're using a fair amount of energy that, like the town complex. I think that would be. So 2, 3, 4, something in that area. Maybe it's 1. I don't know. So
now we have to buy some big storage cells or batteries.
Yep.
How big are those? Are they as big as a washing machine? Are they as big as a...
It depends upon what they're made out of.
Okay.
And we've talked about lithium-ion batteries and lead-acid batteries, which was the old batteries you have in
you
your
mentioned
car.
acid and lead, and I think everybody sort of pulls back
Well,
in terror.
you all have them in your cars unless you
sure.
have a Tesla like yourself.
Yeah.
So, and they're in lots of your devices. You have lots of them just
Right.
in the little batteries you got in flashlights, for example.
So I know LIPA, or PSE&G, I forget which one's which, is building 2 storage battery installations in the town of East Hampton, one out in Montauk someplace and one someplace else. So in our little example here, the town, to coordinate everything going on at the town hall campus, would get some kind of a big battery installation of some kind to store for off-peak hours, or not off-peak, but for dark hours, the electricity it was generating from its various solar panels during the day. Am I missing something there?
No, that's correct. I do want to just correct one. I'd said that the batteries that are in your flashlights and so on are lead acid. That's not correct. But in your battery in your cars.
Yeah, sure.
But what you're trying to do is essentially time sequence your energy use. So if the sun is providing energy during the sunlight hours of the day, then you want to be able to capture any excess of that you're not using at the time and put it into something that you can now rapidly deploy when you need it. And this is very important when we deal with super peak demand in the summer, for example. If we had lots of households that had solar and battery, then we actually can address the peak demand issue very rapidly by reducing the amount of demand on the overall system during those peak
right now,
events.
I know LIPA is talking, again, I apologize whether it's LIPA or PSE&G, is talking about spending basically $500 million to build more transmission lines out here to take care of the peak.
That's correct.
And what you're suggesting is that's
not necessary.
That's not necessary.
That's correct. And there is actually a federal law that says that you first have to look at non-wires solutions. Order 1000 from FERC, the Federal
Energy Regulatory Commission.
Right. So we actually we do not need it in East Hampton. That's very clear if we build out solar and batteries, and it would be less expensive than the over $500 million that would come in transmission lines. So we have a very good argument to FERC that we do not want these transmission lines. We would prefer to have solar and batteries, which might cost $200 to $300 million to address the peak issue, and it's done.
And that would take care of the whole of East Hampton, really.
That's correct. And probably all of the South Fork is what we want to do, is build that solution for the South Fork.
So you're talking about $200 or $300 million. It's only $200 or $300 million, but $200 or $300 million to build battery installations for the town of East Hampton or for the whole South Fork, would you guess?
Well, I think for us to address it in East Hampton, probably $200 million is my guess. Okay.
But at that point, and again, this is pie in the sky in theory, but let's understand it. So we spent $200 million. LIPA does not spend $500 million to bring more wires into the town. And we have this we have either a massive or distributed battery installations around the town. I can understand pretty easily and visualize for the town hall campus how I can have wires or whatever you have going from one building to another to move electricity around as needed in that campus.
Yes.
Now I got all these batteries all over town. I've got people with houses. How do we move the excess electricity that Arthur Malman is generating beyond that, even which I can store in my own battery to get it over to Michael McDonald's house? How do I do that?
Okay, so there are two elements. There are three scenarios here. One is you have a market in which you can sell your energy to the New York ISO by
New York, what's that stand for? New York
Independent Service Organization, something like that. So they manage the energy markets for New York State. And if you use energy arbitrage, essentially you can sell, if you're overproducing your energy, you sell essentially negative energy, the fact that you're not consuming part of the grid, okay? Mm-hmm. So that if you now have 300,000 people, let's say 100,000 people now are no longer consuming the energy from the grid, that means that you're taking offline a lot of production of fossil fuel energy, right? So now you can sell back that negative energy into this energy market.
So I affect in my little example here, and as I'm understanding this now, what I'm doing is I'm not selling energy back to the New York State, whatever it's called, NISO. I'm really getting a credit from NISO for the fact that my town is not taking energy out of this system.
That's correct. So
that's easy. That's easy to visualize.
Well, that's the fastest way we can do this. We change the laws and we go to selling these RECs, these renewable energy credits, from going toward renewable energy, and we're essentially trading on negative energy we do not use, which means we don't have to build infrastructure.
Now you said something very important, though. You said all we have to do is change the laws. So.
Well, you're a lawyer, so
I know
you just do that.
Yeah, but I know it takes hours and days and years. So we can conceptually get the town of East Hampton, and not everybody actually, just a bunch of people in town, many people in the town, with solar arrays on their roofs. We can get solar arrays on parking lots. We can generate a lot of solar energy around the town, and maybe some wind energy from a windmill here and there.
Yeah.
So that we could become, as a town, effectively self-sufficient with today's technology.
Yes.
But although I would probably be able to apply to NISO for one of these negative energy credits or a cash payment, whatever, I guess probably a cash payment. I can't do that because of some laws that probably require me to deal through PSE&G at the moment.
Here, but in other places it's already happening. So it's changing very rapidly. These laws are changing, all in many places. And Hawaii and California and Australia, for example, are leading, but the laws are already beginning to erode in even very conservative places like Florida, for example. So, but it is true that there's a strong monopoly hold on these kinds of issues in Long Island today.
At the moment.
That's correct.
Probably because of the history of Shoreham and the legacy of Shoreham and people here paying for Shoreham to have gone away and so forth. Okay.
That's correct. So, but in the Brooklyn microgrid, for example, which has been up for the last probably 3 to 5 years now, you have essentially the essence of what you could put in the compound here for the town hall. And
where is this Brooklyn microgrid? Is it
in Brooklyn, New York?
I knew I'd get an answer. Is it near the old Navy Yard, or?
The old Navy Yard also has its own system, but this, and I can't remember the neighborhood that it's in. I don't know Brooklyn all that well.
Well, but it's really a neighborhood with people and stores and everything else.
Yeah, but again, there are still restrictions on what they can do. They can sell they cannot sell their energy, but they can trade environmental attributes because there is no law against that. Okay, but what we're talking about, technically, what they are doing could be done at the town hall now, linking the exchange of energy and the storage of energy for the police department, for the courthouse, for the town hall itself, for the administrative offices.
Okay, so let's say we get the whole town hall campus set up as a microgrid, and now they've got extra.
Yeah.
And let's say Joe's Pizzeria, actually probably Goldberg's Delicatessen, is within a stone's throw. What you're really suggesting is, forget the law for a second, the town hall complex can actually start selling extra electricity to Goldberg's Delicatessen, to the pizzeria on the corner and stuff like that.
Technically, yes, okay?
Technologically, yes.
Yes, but part of the problem is that LIPA has been illegally accounting for their different charges of distribution of energy and the purchase of the power generation.
Sure.
So they've essentially cooked the books, so you can't actually tell what the cost of an electron is moving through.
Yeah, I mean, basically what you're saying is, if I want to go and buy my electricity from Agira Energy, and LIPA charges 10 cents a kilowatt, without something, 10 cents, and Agira charges 5 cents, great, I've saved 5 cents in my example on every something I buy of electricity. However, I still got to pay a lot of money to LIPA to carry my electricity over their lines.
More money than it's
it's really worth. Yeah.
That's correct.
So if some,
which suits their purpose.
Sure.
It stops the market.
Yeah.
Basically,
What
from going
it basically
this direction.
does is it makes Arthur feel good that I'm able to buy my electricity cheaper, but my electrical bill doesn't go from $100 down to 20.
Correct.
It goes from 100 to 80.
Yeah, or it really
60 or
doesn't give
70.
you any benefit, and that's unfortunately the games that are being played right now to make sure that the distributed energy doesn't emerge. But when you have it within a compound, so if it's behind the meter, if you
Right,
only have one meter
Right.
for that town hall complex, then you can do whatever you want to do in that. The LIPA can't tell you, I'm sorry, you can't move electricity from your meter to your stove.
Okay, so now let's take the airport. Again, something that's pretty easy to visualize. We have an airport with lots of land around it. We have a parking lot out there. We have vacant land in between runways and taxiways and stuff like that. We also have a road at the end of the airport called Industrial Road, and while most people don't realize it, the commercial buildings on Industrial Road are really airport land. So in this example, we can go out to the airport, start building our microgrid out there with solar panels on our parking lot, solar panels on our buildings, solar panels on top of the hangars that people have. And by the way, I understand there are now solar panels you can use near airports that don't reflect the wrong way and to glare for airplanes flying over. And besides just storing electricity to operate our landing lights at night and all those type of things, I guess probably since it's airport property, we could start going down Industrial Road and selling to our own tenants.
If there's only one meter that comes into the whole complex.
Oh, okay.
And so if it's all behind the meter.
Oh, okay. So
then-
right now we can't go outside. I mean, I'm sure these, in fact, I know, a lot of these people I just rattled off on Industrial Road, the hangar owners and stuff, they all have their own meters. So we can't really go that far as to sell electricity to the hangar owners. They could have their own solar panels on the roof, they have a battery inside, they can store their own power, use it for their own hangar. Okay.
Yeah, this is where community choice aggregation becomes important, and for us to establish a regulatory sandbox.
Okay, I know community choice aggregation is complicated enough that we have to at least devote a segment to it. But so really now, my microgrid at Town Hall and the Town Hall complex, I can understand. We could do something like that for the airport. We can't do it for the hangar owners because they have their own meters. We can't do it for but we could do it for all the electricity consumed at the airport. And I guess we can even put in electric vehicle charging stations in the airport parking lot, so people are under the canopy and charging their electric vehicles.
Yes.
So there's a lot that, with present-day technology, and I guess within the law framework we have still have, we can actually come a long way to really starting to try to build some of these microgrids in the town of East Hampton.
That's correct.
At least for electricity.
Yeah, and there are neighborhoods now that are going toward microgrids.
But they have to get legislation passed because from what you said, I can't go from one metered location to another by law.
Unless people drop their meter. So if you can imagine a set of households around a pond, for example, or along the waterfront, you're not crossing a street. So if you have the ability to build a microgrid in an area where they can be islandable, then that is also...
So my example, where we have hangars at the airport, if those people give up their hangars, give up their
grid connection,
their meters, they can plug into the airport-wide microgrid.
Yeah, so
I'm making it simple, and it's much more complicated.
Yeah, I think that LIPA will fight any of this.
I'm sure they'll fight it, and I'm going to fight the clock, Mike, because we now have exactly 3 seconds left for me to. So thank you so much, really. I mean, we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah, but going deep.